Welcome back, guys. Today we have the amazing Dr. Joe with us. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's awesome.
Oh, we're a bit excited.
We're so excited.
A little bit nervous. We have a wish list.
We do have
if you don't know, Joe, and you've been on it for a very long time. Lucy and I followed you from back when we were in our journeys, 2021.
Yeah, March 2021.
Yeah, so I'm like obsessed with your Instagram page and everything that you do, and so is Lucy, as well as all your podcasts that you're on. So we're very honoured to have you here today.
Well, look, it's a great thing that you guys are doing as well. I mean, I think, one of the really good things about social media, and to a certain degree also podcasting, is a way of being able to communicate really complex medical things in sort of a way that gives people an opportunity to understand them, and more importantly, learn from them and learn from your experiences that you guys have had going through your challenges through fertility, but then also having an opportunity to speak to relatable medical professionals in the area that can at least navigate some of those complexities. So it's a privilege and an honour to be on your podcast.
Oh, thank you.
And I feel like we have so many friends that are with you.
Yeah.
And I always said we need another Dr. Joe in Sydney.
Yes. I feel like had we have not met, like I remember before we met our Dr. Charlie, because we got to share our doctor, I remember thinking, if only I was in Melbourne, I'd be seeing Dr. Joe, and then I'd stay on with Dr. Joe for, the OB factor as well, which is something that we got to do with Dr. Charlie. So that was a blessing, and it's definitely something that I look back and think it's such an advantage to have the fertility specialist take you the whole way. And so I remember saying to Lucy, if only we were in Melbourne, like Dr. Joe would be where I'd be going for sure. And I know that there's many Sydney girls the same.
Yeah, and I must admit there are some people who actually, I've had a few people from Queensland and also from Sydney that have come down to Melbourne for fertility care. And actually a lady from Cairns who had her baby most recently in Melbourne. She was pregnant, and we did a bit of telehealth throughout her pregnancy as she travelled down the east coast of Melbourne and then had her baby in Melbourne. So you can still do it remotely. People from
girls, you can.
Absolutely. I've had people from Perth. I've had people from Thailand, the UK.
Oh, my God. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That is so cool. I think what you do is super special, like being a doctor and talking on social media, even podcasting. I think it's so intimidating going to see a doctor, but I feel like you just break that down for us. And you're just so genuine and real and make it feel less intimidating.
It's so approachable. Like just watching your Instagram, I just think, there's all that warm and fuzzy, and you don't have that fear of, Dr. Joe's a doctor, and there's no intimidation at all. And there's just genuine care. So I do.
Yeah, I think I often say to my junior colleagues that there's three things that really matter in terms of being a healthcare professional, and this is true, I suppose, in any field, not necessarily just in medicine, but you need to be able to do something, whatever that might be, whatever skill you have in whatever field. And most of us who have finished medicine and finished our fertility training will have come out with all the skill sets that allow us to be a doctor in the area of fertility. So how you then communicate those things to patients, your affability is probably one of the most important things. So being able to get complex medical issues, relate them in a way that allows the person who's in the room with you to understand those complex issues in a way that's relatable, understandable, but more importantly, that they can actually see through all the techno mumbo jumbo. And then the last thing is also being available. And one of the things that's unfortunate for us is that as we become more experienced and our books become, full, it's hard to see patients. I mean, my car's in the car park at Epworth Freemasons and Melbourne IVF, first thing in the morning before any other car, and leaves pretty much, the last in the car park as well. And that's because, I do a combination of both that fertility and also that pregnancy care, which means that I sort of need to be available almost 24/7 for my patients, which is, something I do. But also I love being able to get on social media and give people who aren't necessarily my patients, like yourselves up in Sydney and people all around the world. I get DMs from people in the US, and Ireland and, South Africa, and, just where they want to understand these issues that, sometimes they're fertility specialists. And I'd love to be able to give everyone the advice. And one of the things I will say to people is that it's really difficult as a healthcare professional to provide medical advice over DMs. And that's why I tend to do those Q&As, which are really generic.
They're awesome.
And so they give enough information that hopefully people can appreciate and also learn from.
Yes. And how many hours sleep do you get? Because I feel like if you're not working, you're on social media. So
you don't stop.
So curious. Is it like 4 hours, 5 hours too?
And you're right. And I'm waking up in the middle of the night to catch babies. Look, I have a pretty, I'm really fortunate. I've got a really good supportive team that works within my room. So wonderful administrative team, wonderful midwives, wonderful nurses, a GP that works with me, a naturopath. I've got a psychologist and a physio. So all my patients are really well supported. Yeah. But in addition to that, I've got a really good supportive family, good kids, good wife, and I get a good night's sleep. But, it's sometimes broken because I do need to catch a bubba. And I try to fit in exercise on top of that.
You're amazing.
Got them all in together. How much sleep? Look, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of something called 8 Sleep. It monitors your sleep overnight. And on average, I get about 7 hours to 7.5. So I do pretty well.
That's pretty good.
I'm surprised, actually.
You're amazing.
Yeah. Broken. Sometimes it's broken.
Yeah. Time management is important.
But you're very efficient. Mind you, this week I said to Lucy, is Dr. Joe going to be recording from Sicily while having a gelato? Or is he going to be actually back in Melbourne?
It was very tempting. If it would have been a week earlier, I could have been doing it in up in Taormina. That would have been nice.
That would have been
it looked amazing.
Nice.
But so good that you had a break too.
Yeah.
Important.
Absolutely. It was nice to have a break.
Before we get started, Joe, do you want to introduce yourself to everybody?
One of the things, as I sort of said a bit earlier on, is I have that wonderful, unique opportunity of being able to care for women, couples, single women, heterosexual couples, all the way through from preconception, all the way through fertility journeys, preconception advice. So not necessarily people that are going to do IVF or fertility treatment, but also managing that fertility and also being able to care for them during their pregnancy. So it's one of those unique situations where someone, if they are doing IVF with me, get to see me before they commence their IVF for the embryo transfer, take the first baby shots, which I think are the most wonderful and special thing to do, taking those 6-week ultrasound scans and seeing a baby's heartbeat. And then, of course, managing their pregnancy in combination with my team and then being there for the birth. And, I'd love one day to have a bit of time-lapse photography of me popping in the little embryo and 9 months later catching
that'd be so cool.
You have to do that.
So it's quite cool. And, look, I did a lot of stuff before I did obstetrics and gynecology. I did physician training. I was on my way to becoming a cardiologist, and then I saw the light and went into women's health. And I think, look, it is one of those beautiful things where, there's not one day that I wake up and not be happy about going to work. We're very fortunate as obstetricians and gynecologists and fertility specialists that we're there in very happy times in terms of pregnancy, but that we're also there in terms of, the hardships as well, and being able to care for people during what are very difficult times, whether it be fertility and not being able to become pregnant and pregnancy losses and whether that be early pregnancy losses or late pregnancy losses, and being there for the tough times is just as important as being there for those really happy times as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. So today's episode's actually quite near and dear to my heart. I definitely spent most of my 30s worrying about my future fertility naively, and I met my husband later in life, and I started my journey in my 40s. So for anyone out there today that are in their 40s and starting, today's episode will be a good one to listen to. So we'll get started with the questions, yeah?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so the first question, the latest ABS stats show that the fertility rate for women aged 40 to 44 has nearly doubled compared to 30 years ago. what do you think's driving the trend?
It's interesting. Yeah, well, very true. I mean, look, I think the reality is, like you said, it's sort of finding your partner potentially later on in life. One of the things, if you speak to older midwives who work in the maternity wards, they'll say to you that any woman over the age of 34, 40 or 50 years ago, was considered to be geriatric. I mean, we don't use that term anymore now. But the reality is that, generations ago, and I'm 50 now, so, my mum, when she had me, she was 23. And 50 years ago, you were having babies at 21, 22, 23, 24. Now, of course, we've advanced in terms of our socioeconomic patterns since then, and more women obviously participating a lot more in the workforce. And that means, from their perspective, they're delaying their fertility in pursuit of a career excellence. But in addition to that, also we're not meeting people early on in our reproductive lives. At 22 now, if anyone's pregnant at 21, 22, we think, what's going on there? It's so early to have a baby.
Yeah.
Right? And when I get a 21-year-old now who's pregnant, everyone's like, whoa, she's only 21. Well, she's only 21, but in actual fact, that's probably the best time for someone to become pregnant. But the reality is our society doesn't allow for that. Now, that's a range of factors. It's got to do with economic factors. The fact that we are pursuing more in terms of what we want to drive for in work, and also in our economic patterns. I mean, to buy a house 50 years ago cost you $3,000, cost you $20,000 the median price of the house. Don't quote me on that. But, it was low, and your salary was enough to cover the mortgage. You were able to save 20% of the deposit within a very short amount of time. And the reality is now we don't have that ability. So as a dual couple, as a single woman particularly, it's really hard. And are we supported by government? We're not supported by government. Women are not supported in the government in order to help them transition from the workforce into motherhood, which I would argue is probably the best job in the world. But, I never get the fortunate pleasure of being a mum. But, it is the most important job, and yet we don't support, the government doesn't support that. So I think that delays things. And then there's social factors in terms of meeting people. And what I have seen is not only women delaying their fertility in terms of the socioeconomic impact, but I've seen a lot more women who are also embarking on fertility treatment as a single woman. And that largely is in part because there may not be a Mr. or Mrs. Right. And they want to be a mum. And often when I see a woman for egg freezing, I'll actually say to them, do you want to be a mum now? Or is it because you want to preserve your fertility for later? And there will be a lot of women who will have come just for the purposes of egg freezing, who will then think about it and go, actually, I want to be a mum. Wow. And I can count, there's heaps of women, not just one on one hand. There's heaps of women where they've come for egg freezing and then they've been a mum, 9 to 12 months later.
Wow, I love that.
Cool. Yeah, I love that too.
We often hear age is the biggest factor in fertility. I know, Yael, you heard this a lot throughout your journey. Can you explain exactly how and why egg quality changes over time?
Well, so a lot of it's got to do, when we talk about it, it's really the concept of aging is a hard thing, isn't it? Because when we think about aging, we think about what happens to our bodies. And, as you get older, you get a bit more wrinkly and your back hurts a little bit more. But, that doesn't happen necessarily to the ovaries. Women, unlike men produce sperm on a 3-monthly cycle. So whatever sperm a guy produces today has only been in production for 3 months, whereas a woman's actually born with all her eggs that she'll ever have. And in fact, the most amount of eggs she'll have will be when she's inside her mother's tummy. And then she'll lose half of those eggs by the time she is born. And when you hit your reproductive life, you've got around about 400,000 eggs. And then over the course of that journey, it diminishes down until when there's no eggs. And, of course, you reach menopause. But along with that comes what is the aging process of the egg. And that really is how many of the eggs that are going to be chromosomally normal. As an example, Down syndrome, which is something that people are reasonably familiar with, at the age of 30, the chance of having a child with Down syndrome sits at around about 1 in 1,000. And by the time a woman hits 35, that sits at 1 in 350. And by the time we hit 40, that sits at 1 in 100. So you can see there's a marked decrease increase in terms of Down syndrome. The way that I like to explain it is, imagine chromosomes are like volumes of an Encyclopedia Britannica. So on the female or the biological mother's side, you'll have 2 volume 1s, 2 volume 2s, all the way through until we hit 22. So we all have a pair of 22 chromosomes plus also our sex chromosomes. So the woman will have an X sex chromosome as well, so 2 volume X's. And on the paternal side, 2 volume 1s, 2 volume 2s, all the way through until we hit 22, plus also an X and a Y. Now, for those people who remember watching Harry Potter and all the books flying around, Hogwarts, well, if you imagine when we create an embryo, it's like grabbing a volume 1 from a woman's side and another volume 1 from the paternal side, and then repopulating a new bookshelf. So 1, then you grab the 2, then you grab the other 2, so on and so forth. And you can see these books one at a time flying in. The woman will obviously give an X and the bloke will give either an X and a Y, and that new bookshelf will form your baby. Unfortunately, as a woman ages, the volumes of the encyclopedia become stuck, or they can become sticky rather. Wow. So what can happen is, rather than 1 book come out of the bookshelf, 2 books can come out of the bookshelf. Or alternatively, both books get stuck within the bookshelf. And what that means is that this new embryo, or this new baby that's being formed, gets an unbalanced amount of chromosomes, or an unbalanced amount of volumes of an encyclopedia. And that ultimately leads to chromosomal abnormalities in the embryo, which therefore makes it more difficult to become pregnant, whether it be naturally or alternatively if we're doing IVF. So when we're selecting embryos for a woman who's over the age of 38, 39, 40, we may suggest undertaking pre-implantation genetic testing to make sure that all the volumes within the embryo that have been created are normal, and that none have been stuck in one of the bookshelves, or that too many have come out. And so that aging process predominantly relates to these chromosomes.
I love that. That was such a good way of explaining it.
Great visual.
Yeah.
Love the hand gestures.
We do them all the time. If a woman with more birthdays, like me, is thinking of having a baby later in life, what proactive fertility assessments should they consider?
Well, I think if you're starting out on your fertility journey, one of the things you want to work out is, and I say to couples when they're coming to see me with respect to their fertility, there's 6 things that you need in order to conceive. And so the first of which is sex. And, it's not surprising. Well, I actually find it shouldn't be surprising that some people don't have sex frequently enough, and perhaps aren't doing it at the right time. So we look at sex, when to have sex, proactively having sex around ovulation. For those women having a 28-day menstrual cycle, that means around having sex around day 14, but invariably somewhere every second day between day 10 through to day 20. And then we also look at the male sperm. So whenever we look at sperm and egg quality, we put those two together. We need to make sure that I often say to a couple when they're conceiving that you're about to bake a cake. And if you're about to bake a cake, you need the best quality egg and the best quality flour. Now, if I get a rotten egg and some moldy flour and I bake a cake, I can put the beautiful icing sugar all over it, or icing on it, decorate it, make it look beautiful. But as soon as we go into that cake and eat it, it's not going to taste good. And equally so, you might create a baby, but we don't know the epigenetics, the little genes that switch on and off that might predispose a young bubba, and then that bubba subsequently becoming a child and adult to particular diseases. So making sure that we're maintaining a very healthy diet, taking in some cases some supplements to improve both egg and sperm quality is going to be particularly important, and particularly as you age, in order to improve the chances of pregnancy. And then the other thing is we look at things like a receptive uterus, so a uterus that's structurally normal with no impediment to pregnancy. So if you've got problems with respect to heavy bleeding or alternatively painful periods, these can be indications that perhaps there might be fibroids or alternatively endometriosis, and addressing those issues in the first instance will be particularly important. So again, a preconception workup is going to be really important. Looking at ovulation, how frequently that occurs, and if you're not ovulating that frequently, then perhaps seeking the advice of a fertility specialist very early on in your journey is going to be important. Ovulation, we'll talk about ovulation, open tube. So any past history throughout your reproductive life or sexual history where you've had pelvic inflammatory disease or sexually transmitted infections that might predispose you to having a blocked tube. And that may be, for example, even a ruptured appendix where there's a possibility there may have been some spill of fecal material into the pelvis, which can cause adhesions as well. That's
wow, I didn't even know that.
Blocked as well.
That's wild.
And then the other thing, even when you're starting out the journey as an older woman, is, or what are we saying, more
birthdays, they say.
More birthdays. And, having a bit of patience and resilience. But, it's all about also surrounding yourself with a village. And that includes guys like you in terms of the podcast, your GP, other healthcare practitioners, allied healthcare practitioners, and then, finally, fertility specialist if you need to. And remember, seeing a fertility specialist doesn't necessarily mean you're moving straight on to IVF either.
Yeah.
And I think the key message really for me is, and look, I say this to everyone, and it's irrespective of how many birthdays you've celebrated, that, women and couples should contemplate pregnancy when they're physically, financially, socially, emotionally, and medically ready to do so. So there's 5 things there. However, you're not going to get all 5 things. So you might not get the house that you want with 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms and the double garage, and you might not get that. One of the things you will do in your life, and I speak as someone who's a little bit older, is you will never regret having a child, but you may regret not being able to have one. And so even in my own sort of perspective, my wife and I, very early on in our relationship, actually, I had the best job in the world. I was a resort doctor on an island in Fiji.
That's so cool.
I was the best job in the world. If I could go back there right now. Actually, second to this job, but it was a really cool job. So wonderful 5-star luxury resort. And but there was many women there who were coming specifically for the purpose. So I was 27. My wife at that point in time was 24. And there were couples in their late 30s who were coming there basically because they were doing fertility treatment and they had tired themselves, and they were having a holiday to try to break up what is the really hardship of doing fertility treatment and multiple cycles and failed cycles. And my wife at that point in time was pretty much on that employment career trajectory path. And every single one of those women who came, and there were CEOs of companies, mayors of towns, lawyers, doctors, all these women went out together the boys would go fishing and the girls would do some other activity. So it was a very posh to do resort. So, everyone sort of was like Gilligan's Island a little bit. They all went off. Anyway,
I love it.
And all the women said to my wife, they said, if I had my time again, I would have had a baby in my 20s.
Wow.
And so my wife went from going, I don't want to have kids until after 30 and maybe once I get close to 35, to going, actually, I want to be a mum and, let's have a baby now. So, we had a child really young in life. So that physically, financially, socially, emotionally, and medically, I mean, obviously we can't all do it. Yeah. We've got to be in the right headspace. We've got to have at least most of those things together. But, and that's why in some cases, if socially you don't have a male partner, if you're a single woman, well, then there is an ability to be able to do it.
Yeah.
If you want to.
Yeah.
I love that.
And what's your take on lifestyle factors, diet, exercise?
Yeah, massive. I mean, and that's true whether you're 21 or whether you're 40 or 45 and trying to do IVF. So diet and exercise is particularly important. I mean, not only for our own general health, but also to improve the outcomes in terms of IVF and, more importantly, also improve the outcomes in terms of pregnancy reduction in diabetes and high blood pressure. And that's one of the things, I suppose, the beauty of also being an obstetrician in terms of fertility is that I'm not sort of thinking about just becoming pregnant. So I'm thinking about how are we going to make sure this is a healthy pregnancy so that we're having a baby at 20, not at 29 weeks or 25 weeks because we've got some medical issue that's concerning us, but more importantly, we're going to have a baby, 39, 40 weeks and take home a beautiful, happy, healthy bubba.
Yeah, I think a lot of us obsess with the diet side of things.
Yeah.
Like me and Yael done gluten-free, dairy-free, and then I also done no sugar.
Yeah.
Do you think it balance is okay? What's your thoughts on still having?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah. Look, I think a Mediterranean diet, there's been proven to improve the chances. Now, Mediterranean diet, of course, doesn't mean what I've just had being over in Italy, which is pizza, pasta,
just carbs,
and gelati. Oh my God, a gelato, granita first thing in the morning, beautiful.
I love it.
But it is legumes, fruit, veggies, lots of seafood, a little bit of red meat, and of course taking antioxidants in terms of supplementation. So these are the sort of things that are going to improve the chances. Because it's the 1%ers as well. You're looking to improve the chances of fertility treatment and or pregnancy naturally by just doing those 1%ers to get you over the line.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. Yeah. And I also love that you mentioned, to also have that patience and resilience, because I feel like we all go, especially when you're going into IVF, and I know I did, and I think, Lucy, you were the same. We all go in thinking that's the answer, that's the solution. First go,
it's a sprint.
Done, and then you end up realising, oh, it's actually not necessarily that easy. And it's a journey. It's not a sprint for sure.
It is, and I think the other thing that we often think, we think that, IVF put an embryo in 100% chance it's going to work. And the reality of the situation is that it doesn't necessarily always work 100% of the time. And I often say to couples and to people who are doing IVF that you've got to imagine that if you're having sex in a heterosexual relationship and you have sex in January, if you're a young couple, the chance of pregnancy is 15 to 20%. Now, if I had 100 women, and let's make it 20% because the maths is easy, in January, 20 of them get pregnant and 80 don't. If everyone just went, oh, it's never going to work, we'd not have babies.
Yeah.
Right? And part of the thing we talk about is what's termed a cumulative pregnancy rate. So that means the more times we do it, the better the chance that you'll actually conceive. So in nature, if we're trying naturally, if there's that 100 women and in January 20% have got pregnant, leaving 80 who aren't, well, of the remaining 80, a further 20% of those will get pregnant. So it doesn't mean 60% aren't and 20 aren't. It means 80, 20% of the remaining 80 is 16. So 16 now get pregnant, leaving 64 who aren't. And then 20% of that 64 will get pregnant. So that's 12 odd women. So 12 will become pregnant and that leaves 52 that aren't. And so in the same manner, when we're doing IVF, this notion of a cumulative pregnancy rate means that if we put one embryo in, yes, a certain percentage will get pregnant. Let's say, for argument's sake, 30% will get pregnant, so 70 won't. And then we know that of the remaining 70, 30% of those will get pregnant, so, roughly around about 20 to 25 women. And so the more times we put an embryo in, the higher the chance that you are going to be in the group that are pregnant. And this is why the University of New South Wales did a study which ultimately said that 80 to 90% of couples are going to, women or people doing IVF, are going to achieve pregnancy after 3 stimulated cycles, and the transfer of all those embryos within those cycles. Remember that at one cycle of the stimulation where you collect the eggs and create the embryos, you may end up getting 2 or 3 embryos. And so you've got to transfer 1, 2, 3 embryos, and that's one cycle complete. I often say to couples that, around 50% of people are going to achieve pregnancy after 3 embryos, good quality embryos being transferred, and around 80% after 6. And so it also allows us to understand what is implantation failure, when are we going to start being concerned that these embryos aren't working. And often, after one embryo, oh my God, it's not working, I'm changing a fertility specialist. It's probably not That's what a lot of people do, right?
I love
It's
that.
probably not the best thing to do, right? Because that fertility specialist, I mean, look, I have a real vested interest in people getting pregnant. Every fertility specialist does. But my vested interest is I want you to be pregnant because I want to be caring for you when you're pregnant and I want to look after you when you and help you catch your baby. But, we all want the same outcome, which is, it's actually interesting, we strive, every unit, Melbourne IVF, IVF Australia, wherever you are, we strive for the best possible pregnancy rate in order to get our patients the desired outcome that they want. And so, not changing specialists in the first instance. And look, listening to podcasts, gleaning information, and ask your specialist the question, should we be considering this? It's not, I think the worst thing as a fertility specialist will be to poo-poo a patient. And number one, I learn from my fertility patients who come and see me, and it's only through that shared knowledge that we can ultimately get a better result.
Yeah, I love that.
I love that too. With more women delaying motherhood, is egg freezing a realistic and effective safeguard for their future fertility?
Yeah, obviously egg freezing has become, pretty popular, not only here in Australia, but of course around the world, as women are wanting to delay their fertility. And it gives them the opportunity to provide what I consider to be an insurance policy, but not an assurance policy that you're going to be pregnant. So an insurance policy is something that is there that you hope never to use. The true test of whether you're going to be a mum is you being pregnant and having a baby in your arms. And so that's why whenever I do see women for fertility purely on the basis of egg freezing, I ask them the question, do you want to be a mum now? Because it will change, as I said earlier, some of their perceptions about what they want to do, and they then decide to become a mum. We know that egg freezing, because of the improvements with respect to technology, so our ability to be able to snap freeze eggs effectively and rehydrate those eggs in a manner that doesn't cause the eggs to disintegrate, gives a viable alternative to women in order to be able to give themselves that insurance policy for the future. Equally so, though, and I'm not saying that this happens all the time, but you can have these eggs frozen and it may not result in a pregnancy in the future. So this is why, if you're 30 and 31, 32, 33 thinking about freezing your eggs, I'd still say to you that at 36 and 37, if you have it, you've almost got to have those eggs in the bank. They will give you an insurance policy for the future. But you've also got to be saying to yourself on a yearly basis, am I ready to be a mum? 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 Because your circumstances may change, and those 5 factors at any point in time might change that might precipitate you then to go, okay, look, you know what? I will now do it on my own, or I've met the right bloke, or I'm in the right relationship with a female partner, and now's the time to utilise those eggs. So is it viable? Yes. Is the technology good? Absolutely. Are we getting good pregnancy rates in terms of the fertilisation and then subsequent implantation of those eggs to have babies? Absolutely. And is it just as good as doing an egg, comparatively a 33-year-old woman doing IVF purely for the purposes of fertility as opposed to a 33-year-old woman freezing eggs? Are the outcomes the same? They are. So, I would say that if you are contemplating delaying your fertility, then freezing eggs is something to consider, absolutely.
Yep. And speaking of freezing eggs, can you tell us more about the new egg freezing calculator and how it's been designed to help women understand the impact of age on female fertility and provide more clarity around egg freezing results?
Yeah, so one of the things that the Virtus Group, which includes a lot of companies with IVF, so Queensland Fertility Group, IVF Australia, Melbourne IVF, Tas IVF, I suppose to a certain degree, our sister cities are sister companies overseas. But we've put together all the data with respect to the eggs that we've collected over the course of many years and had a look at the birth and pregnancy outcomes when women go to utilise those eggs. And so, as I said before, in terms of ageing of eggs, we know that the younger you are when you freeze eggs, the less likely you're going to have abnormal eggs. And so therefore, the fewer eggs that you'd actually need in order to achieve pregnancy. So a woman less than 35 will need approximately 20 eggs in order to give her a near 90% chance of pregnancy. Now, the number of eggs you then need in order to give you that chance of one baby increases over time because, of course, there's going to be more eggs that are chromosomally abnormal. So this calculator allows you to look at what your age is and what the chance of pregnancy is, and then give you an understanding of how many eggs you need to have frozen to give you that near 90% chance of pregnancy. And also, then when you are speaking to your fertility specialist, one of the things that we will utilise in terms of understanding how many eggs we can get per cycle is we'll look at your ovarian reserve, and that may be looking at something called the AMH, which gives us an understanding of the ovarian reserve, or actually doing an ultrasound scan to have a look at how many follicles are sitting on the ovaries, because those number of follicles are going to give us an idea of how many eggs we might be able to get during a stimulated cycle. So women will often sit there and go, you know, I went to one fertility specialist and I got 6 eggs, and then the next one I got 12. Now, that fertility specialist is better. It's not necessary that that fertility specialist is better than the other. I often think about follicles on the ovaries as like little sunflower seedlings that are being planted in a sunflower box. So every month a woman will plant a certain number of sunflower seedlings. So if you've got lots of follicles, you might be able to plant 20 little sunflower seedlings. If you've got very few follicles, well, you might only plant 3 or 4. Irrespective of how many follicles you have, and this is why the AMH testing is only suitable for us as fertility specialists. It gives no indication of your ability to be able to conceive naturally, because if you've got 20 or you've got 6, no matter what happens, in nature, your brain secretes a hormone which acts like fertilizer for one of those sunflower seedlings. And so one of those sunflower seedlings will grow into a big, beautiful sunflower, and it'll block out the sunlight of the rest, and the other ones die away. And every month we'll put one sunflower in a vase. And so if you've got 6, 1 will grow. If you've got 20, only 1 will grow and 19 will die. But what we do as fertility specialists is we come along and we give super fertilizer and a hydroponic system, and we grow all the sunflowers up. And so the woman who's got 20, we might be able to get 20 eggs from her. The woman who's got 6, we might only get 6. And so if that particular month she's planted 6 and I go pour fertilizer and water, I'll only get 6. And she's planted 12 that next month, I might use exactly the same doses of medication, exactly the same hydroponic system, exactly the same water, and still I'll be able to get 12. So this is why we get cycle variation. What I say is, you know, every woman's different, but every woman's cycle is different. So often when we're doing egg freezing, we might get a really good response, and then we might get a poor response, and it's purely just the variation in the number of follicles that were there at the very start of the cycle in terms of how well we can stimulate those eggs.
Yeah, so true. I experienced that with my 4 cycles, and all pretty much the same protocol and all different. Like, yeah.
You can't predict it,
Absolutely.
No.
No, look, we can do our best, and it's of course the AMH and the ovarian reserve count on an ultrasound scan. But it's difficult, and until you go through the process of investigation, it's hard to give a good indication.
I love that you said to do the AMH with a fertility specialist. I think that's so important. I remember doing it with my doctor many years ago, and it was like really positive. I had a great AMH reading, and I thought, okay, I'm going to be pregnant the next month, and just didn't happen. So, yeah, I think it's so important to understand it.
Absolutely. So it's not a predictor for pregnancy. We utilise it to sort of give us that understanding of how much fertilizer we need to put on the ovaries in order to collect eggs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. You explain everything so well.
I know.
With all these visual
analogies and stuff.
I love it.
It's great.
Okay. A lot of it's floral.
I have noticed, actually. There's a theme. There is a theme.
Yeah, love it.
I do. When I do all my pregnancy ones, a lot of them are like basketballs and football. I've done some for the dads.
Side. Yeah.
The sports side, exactly.
I love it. That's hilarious. It's good. So this next question, we often see headlines about celebrities having babies at 48 or 50, but there's no mention of donor eggs or IVF. Do you think this kind of secrecy can be like something that, you know, people like myself will then have this false hope that, oh, I've got plenty of time and, you know.
I love this question because I feel like it's so true. There's so many celebrities out there having babies later in life, which is amazing. But I feel like it's just false hope for so many people.
Yeah, and I think, look, fortunately, I think podcasts like this and, you know, through social media and medical influencers actually giving proper medical advice. But by the way, one of the things, my biggest bugbear with Instagram is there's the blue tick for verification, and I have sent email after email after email to Instagram and said, can you just make a green tick? And a green tick would be a verified healthcare professional with their relevant board.
I'm signing that petition. Let's get it done.
Yeah.
And maybe I should do a change.org thing, but they, you know, they would monetize it. Like you would say to the healthcare professional, you've still got to pay you $20 or whatever if you want to be verified as a healthcare professional, and then it would be verified with the medical board, and then the information that you are presenting would have to be as what happens when I'm on Instagram. Everything has to be above board.
Yeah.
And certainly in line with social media guidelines. But anyway, that's just an aside point. Yeah, you're right. So what happens on social media? I'm going to do a change.org.
Yeah, we'll sign it and we'll spread it.
So, look, I think you're right. So fortunately what we're doing, yourselves included, is we're saying to people, fertility, IVF, beyond the age of, generally speaking, 45 for most units, the chance of being able to conceive utilising your own eggs is very, very low. And so in which case, most, if not all, fertility clinics in Australia will not do fertility treatment for women above the age of 45, 46, because we know that, number one, we've got an interest in making sure that we're doing the right thing by the woman, but also we've got an interest in doing the right thing by the taxpayer who's paying Medicare, or Medicare is paying, so taxpayers' dollars are paying for fertility treatment. So we know that over the age of 45 that the chances are significantly low, and so we don't offer fertility treatment. That's not to say that at 44 you can't get pregnant. Of course you can, and so we would, do fertility IVF over the age of 44. So when women become pregnant after the age of 45, 46, they're doing so on the basis of two factors. Number one, they're frozen eggs from their younger selves. So effectively, if you're frozen your eggs at 33, those eggs are going to be around for you to use up into your early 50s. Or alternatively, they're utilising donor eggs. And so we know, therefore, that the chance of pregnancy doesn't relate to the woman's chronological age, their age that they are. It relates to the age of the eggs. And this is why someone at the age of 48 could easily get pregnant with a donor egg from a woman who's 25. Because the uterus, even if you're menopausal, we can prepare the uterus, if you're not having periods, we can prepare the uterus with estrogen and progesterone, mimicking what is otherwise a normal menstrual cycle in order to prepare the uterus for an embryo. So, your chance of pregnancy, and certainly some of my patients who have gone through fertility journeys where we've exhausted all the options in terms of their own eggs, will then move on to donor eggs. And certainly those women over the age of 46, 45, 46 will consider using donor eggs as well.
Yeah. Love that.
Yeah, that was actually our next question, because we had a episode with Blanca from Prague, an IVF guide, and I know the guidelines are a little bit different overseas. I think the cutoff was around 49.
Yeah, it was 49.
48, 49 for using your own eggs. And we just wanted to know in Australia why it was exactly 45 to 46. And has it always been that kind of cutoff? Or did you guys discover that over time?
Well, I think it's got to do what we consider to be futile. So whenever you do a medical procedure, so remembering that we are not when you're paying for IVF, you're paying in part from your own pocket, but also as a taxpayer, we're paying as well. So when we're doing any medical procedure, we want to make sure that we're getting, and this is true of any drug, a pharmaceutical drug. We want to make sure that we're utilising our health expenditure in a way that's going to give a positive outcome. And if we know that the chance of pregnancy is very, very low over a certain age, it would be improper of us to use taxpayers' dollar, and it would be more so improper to ask a woman to utilise her own money, or a couple to utilise their own money to pay for something that we know the chance is going to be exceptionally low. Now, some people will argue, well, I don't care if it's 0.5%, I'll still take that chance. Well, yeah, okay, but if I was a builder and I said to you, I can build your house, 0.5% chance I'll get your house built, in the next couple of weeks, you're gonna have to pay me $50K. You go, what the?
Yeah.
And so we've also got to be realistic that yes, it's a dream, and that you could be that 0.5 or that 0.1% chance, but it would be unfair and unjust of us to demand that off people. And, I question, I shouldn't say I question the ethics, but, I question how well people are consented for when they're going across to places like Europe and they're doing cycles at the age of 49. And I question also the statistics in terms of the chances of success, because I think if someone truly knows the chances of success, and I think, people often struggle with the notion of donor eggs, and I never like to trivialise it, but, being a parent is more than just biology. And so I know that a lot of couples and a lot of women who've done donor eggs, once you've had that baby's yours.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's ever been a woman that's regretted. I'm sure there are, but I've not experienced a woman in my practice that's regretted doing donor eggs. And I've had women who have had their own child, biological child, and then struggled with their second child, who've then gone on to do donor eggs as well, and they'll love those children equally. And now I suppose we're in a very different scenario where we'll actually educate our young kids very early about the fact that they're donor conceived, so that they prepare themselves for what that means to them in terms of their life, and how that also will impact them in the future.
Yeah, we've heard so many positive, amazing stories of the ladies that have come on who have gone through the donor process.
And we both considered it ourselves, didn't we, on the journey? So, yeah. I know it's not for everyone, absolutely. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. And sometimes it takes months, if not years, to consider that. And so for people that are listening to this, that are entering into fertility treatment very late on in life, and where they're and also those people who are, towards the latter part of their journey and thinking that there's nowhere else to go, you might not be donor eggs now at the age of 45, but, think that there might be a possibility in 3 or 4 years' time. Your mindset might change. And so, I often say to people that if you think about yourself 5 years ago, you're a completely different person. Well, not completely, but your mindset might be completely different than today. And so in 5 years' time, things might be completely different again.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, so true.
Yeah, I love that. With the current social and medical trends, what do you think Australia's fertility landscape will look like in, say, 20 to 30 years' time?
This is a good question.
Yeah, I'm curious.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
I mean, it's a big one. Question. It's a big one, and if you look at fertility rates across the world, of course, they're declining. Places like Italy, the rate is as low as 1.2%, I think, and certainly parts of Asia. Japan, it's low as well. And I think the reality is that we have got to a stage where it is expensive to have children.
Yeah.
And that expense then drives how many kids we ultimately have. It's driving our reasons for delaying fertility in the first place, but then it's also driving how many children we have. And so we as a society have a big problem. The problem is that we do need population. We need that population not only to support the different types of work that need to be done, but also taxation system to allow for things like IVF and for healthcare and for schooling and stuff like that. And if we're not reproducing at a rate in excess of 2, we'll find ourselves in a lot of difficulty in the future. So, there will need to be strategies put in place that will allow for couples for couples and for single women to consider having more children. Now, that might be looking at childcare. It might also be looking at things like supporting women outside of the workforce in order to care for children. It might be looking at taxation relief in terms of education. But the government needs to be smarter. There's no doubt that there is an element of misogyny when it comes to female reproduction in terms of female healthcare, in terms of rebates for certain procedures, and in terms of also things like medication and the contraceptive pill being one of them. So we do need to look at how well we can support couples, single women, heading into parenthood, and also supporting them once they've got a child moving forward, because we're going to find ourselves in a very difficult situation in the future.
Even since we were cycling to now, there's, like you said, more podcasts. There's people like yourself that are doing all these amazing podcasts, and
it's less to do.
Yeah, so there's people are getting more educated with what's going on, that maybe our kids' generation might have kids young again. Like maybe we might have a full circle.
There might be, and look, I'm sort of a follower of artificial intelligence and Elon Musk and what he's talking about in terms of the future, and perhaps we'll live in a world very soon where we won't want necessarily family in terms of finances, and if that's the case, if energy becomes a lot cheaper, if we're able to live a life that's a lot more comfortable without working excessively, well, then we will turn attention to the things that are really, truly most important. I mean, my grandfather went through several phases in his life, and the first phase was, I remember when I was a young kid, he used to say to me, "What do you call an Italian who owns 5 houses?" And I'd say to him, "Nonno, I don't know." He said, "Lazy."
Wow.
Because they had to own a few more. To when he was on his deathbed, and he said it didn't matter how many houses he had, how many cars he had, how much money he earned. What matters now is the people that are around him. And, often when people say to me, we're stopping at 2 kids or we're stopping at 1 kid, I say to them, look, you know what, you're going through the throngs of changing nappies and so on and so forth. These kids are only kids probably until 12 or 14. Once they're 14 years of age, your kids are out of your house. They're with their mates. They're playing footy, basketball, netball, whatever. They're going to plays, concerts, and you don't actually see them as much. And by the time they hit university, and gone are the days where people stayed home for university, a lot of them now are travelling interstate, they're out of your house. So you got these kids for 12 or 14 years. And so the reality is it's not about the here and now. It's about 30 years from now. It's about who's going to be celebrating your birthdays, who's going to be around the table for religious functions, whether it be Christmas, Yom Kippur, or, a Ramadan. It's who's going to be celebrating all these key events, and ultimately who's going to be there caring for you in the latter part of your life, and who's going to be there, wishing you farewell as you hopefully ascend to heaven and not to hell.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's a nice way to end, isn't it?
I think that's something to think about, though, because me and Yael both have one little one.
Yeah.
And we both have frozen embryos. Yeah, we both have frozen embryos, and we always talk about it, but we always say how scared we are to go through the process again, because we both found it so hard to go through, and what if it doesn't work again? And
the trauma's just so much.
There is, and I think that goes to the first point that we talked about, which is that element of resilience and having your village around you to be able to support you making that decision. And it's difficult because, yes, if you start embarking on that journey and you have that desire, that wish, that want, and it doesn't eventuate, you'll be left heartbroken, and it is a difficult decision. And look, I'm not necessarily speaking just for people who are doing fertility treatment, but of course people who are conceiving naturally. When I say that you won't regret it, and look, I suppose the way to think about it is you might not regret. Sorry, you may not necessarily regret having a kid, but you might regret that you never gave yourself the opportunity to at least try.
Yeah.
And if you go with the mindset that, you know what, I went through it before, I was successful, I might not do another stimulation cycle, fair enough.
Yeah.
Not going to do another stimulation cycle, but I'm going to give these little frozen embryos the best possible chance to become babies. And if they don't, I'm resolute to the fact that that wasn't meant to be, and sometimes fate will ultimately play the ultimate hand.
Yeah.
But at least I've given myself, and when I look back on my life 20 years from now, I'll say, look, I gave it an opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah,
the
I love
mindset
that.
on that. That's a great way to look at it, actually.
Yeah, definitely food for thought too.
Yeah.
We talk about it a lot. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to there's a quote you said recently on your Instagram, and I absolutely loved it. It was about negativity, and when people come to you with negativity and different things, and it was something about your back, and I loved it. Can you remember what it was?
we're putting you on the spot.
Yeah, I mean, no, I do remember. I got sometimes
He's been
I
to
do
Sicily and had gelatos. Like, he's not thinking about his Instagram today.
You said it a couple of times.
I did. I had 2 weeks off or 3 weeks off.
Yeah, see, he's still in holiday mode, Lucy.
Look, I had, the unfortunate thing is when you put yourself out there, you get people who are very critical of what you say.
Yeah.
And, whenever I'm on Instagram or when I'm doing podcasts, I'm not there to give people the wrong advice or offend people. But when people take an offence to something that's shouldn't really be an offence, it might be a differing opinion, and they make negative comments and they bag you and they send you DMs and I'm very fortunate that probably I'd hate to be a celebrity because I'm sure they get a lot worse than what I do, right? And I've got an element of resilience that allows me to be able to say, look, you know what, it's more about them than it is about me. But I think, what I was saying is that I don't know, I'm sure many people have said this, but, if people are talking behind your back, it's because they're behind you and you're leading forward.
I love that.
And I think at the end of the day, I've always gone with the notion that, I will lead from the front in any field that I do. And sometimes that means that if I push forward, I'm going to be the odd one out. And it's very visible. If everyone's in a line and you move forward or they move back, you're left, you're standing there by yourself. But the reality is that if you do that, we have, unfortunately, in Australia, a tall poppy syndrome. And people like to knock people down. And when I first started my Instagram, people go, oh, Joe, he's on Instagram and blah, 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 blah. And I took it to heart to a certain degree at the very start. But now, I know my reasonings are genuine and pure. I'm busy enough, whether it be fertility and obstetrics-wise, that I don't need to do social media. I don't need to be spending 12 hours a day working and then doing an hour on social media and putting myself out there. I do it because I like it. I do it also because I'm helping people that are beyond my reach. I think one of the things, in terms of being a healthcare advocate is that you can help people one-to-one in your consulting room. That's very easy to do, and we all do that as doctors. You can do policy and advocacy, and I've done that through my roles at Australian Medical Association and also through the College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists as a counsellor and sitting on health policy committees. And so that then has a broader reach because you've obviously then been able to influence policy that goes to an extended community in Australia. And then you've got mainstream media and social media, which then puts you out there to a wider group of people who you will never ever see, but yet will take on advice that you might give them in terms of fertility or alternatively pregnancy and gynecological care. That means that they go back to their fertility specialist and ultimately then it changes their outcomes. And so there's I've got heaps of DMs from women and couples that have gone through fertility treatment, and because of something that I suggested, they've gone and spoken to the fertility specialist about that, and then that ended up in the result of them having a baby. So I don't shy away from the fact that, I can cop a bit of criticism from whether it be colleagues or whether it be, people do it annonously, which is what I really hate. Like, you know what, if you're gonna do something,
and a fake name,
fake profile,
put it out there properly. Yeah,
exactly. Get out there and say, this is my name. This is what, at least give me the courtesy of telling me who you are. But, I will wear that because I know that there's, for every one or two people that potentially has a negative comment or something bad to say, I'm hopefully going to have helped 100 to 200
Absolutely.
people.
Absolutely.
That pales into insignificance, and so you do have to. I'm quite emotional being Sicilian, and so I can get quite upset about stuff. But I can also take things to heart, and so one of the things I try to do is to rationalise it in that manner.
Yeah, credit to you, because it is really hard putting yourself out there, but you are making such a difference. And I think it's amazing what you do. And I know it's hard, and I know you don't have any time. You're very busy.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think it's amazing, and that there is quite a few more doctors doing that now. And we love it as patients.
As patients, you need that. I thrived on it. So when we were cycling, I would obsess over all of your stuff. And, even I used to love the ones in the hospital when it's 2 a.m. and I've just caught a baby and I'm heading home, or you'd put your question boxes up.
And Q&As.
They were always great. And I will always think, where do you find the energy and the time? But you do it. And for people that are going through IVF or trying to conceive, they're searching all the time for something. And so who better than a doctor?
Exactly.
Rather than, patient to patient, we leverage off each other and support each other, and that's amazing in the community. But seeing doctors in the community just is, I think it's great.
Yeah. And where can the listeners find you, Dr. Joe?
Well, if you're based in Melbourne, Melbourne IVF and Freemasons, Epworth Freemasons Hospital. And if you're looking for me on socials, Dr. Joseph Sgroi. Now, Sgroi is a very hard name. It's interesting. In Sicily, I'd rock up and say Sgroi, and they knew exactly how to spell it. Oh, you're from the region. You must be Sicilian. Welcome back. And I said, no, I wasn't born here. But I like to say to people that Sgroi is probably the most Australian surname there is. SG, so SGR, Sgroi, but then Aussie, oi, oi, oi. So Sgroi.
I love it.
And so you can easily find me. But so look, and like you said, I try to do a Q&A at least once every 2 weeks and focus on a whole range of women's health issues. I've occasionally thrown a little bit of stuff about my local footy team here in Melbourne, but
we've noticed.
They're not going too well at the moment. But the fact that they're playing tonight, how important is your podcast?
Took you away.
I know, it doesn't matter.
Oh, you're amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We'll link everything in the show notes as well, and we'll also put the calculator, the egg freezing calculator, in the show notes for everyone to utilize as well.
Grand.
Yeah. And definitely go and follow Joe, because it's definitely worth it.
He's incredible.
Yeah. My pleasure.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joe. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Thanks, guys. Bye.